You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, welcome back to the Barbell Logic podcast, Beast Over Burden. I'm Nikki Sims, joined by Andrew Jackson. And we're going to carry on with part 2 of our conversation around gaining strength and changing body composition. We left off with our client who started in, around 170, took him through his journey to gaining strength and changing his composition. Now we have 2 more clients we want to walk through. 2 client types that we're probably pretty familiar with because they might hit some of our characteristics pretty well. But today we want to talk about a client who is kind of going through a phase where they're a little heavier. They're in their, 220s. We'll call a little fluffy. And then we're also going to talk about a female who wants to get strong and everything that she's going to go through. So we have our client who the body type would be what I call the post-athletic body type, where they've done things, they've developed muscle, they're, maybe in their late 30s, early 40s, they have a family, they enjoy grilling and eating delicious meats and drinking beer, and they love whiskey, and, they live a really full life, and they work hard and like to have fun. It's a great body type, in my opinion. But also, I know with that kind of body composition, things can be a little bit uncomfortable. Like it's easy to, especially when you're aging and getting to your 40s, you're like, holy moly, there is a bit more fat around my belly than I remember there being. And all of a sudden you're kind of like, I don't think I like this. And if we think about their empathy map, that's when we really hear like, I want to lean out. Like that seems to be a priority, but they also know they need to keep strength as an underlying priority as well. So have you worked with these clients before?
I've worked with many and have been also in this phase. I think I wasn't maybe 170, but 190. I was probably closer to that.
And you're tall.
Yeah, 6'1". So I was closer to our first case study last week when I first started consistently strength training. I was really big into cycling at the time. Although just prior to that, I was in the fluff zone. I was at 220 to 225.
Okay.
And then that's when I started CrossFit and Paleo Zone, and then dropped down into the kind of the 190 and was arguably heavier on the stress and not enough on the recovery side of things. And then way over invested in the recovery, and then became back into the fluff zone.
I like that. Over invested in recovery. What a great way to say that.
Yes.
Very romanticized.
And then we talked in great length before about my personal experience. But yes, have many clients in this phase. Their journey, if we put it back into that context, I think is, and emotions, if we're going to start there, is, things they're saying are, like you said, I feel a little bit fluffy around the middle. I want to lean out. I want to tighten things up a little bit. I think they're feeling frustrated, a little bit like they're spinning their wheels because they're working really hard again in training. They're making progress maybe in the gym, a lot of them, but it feels like the things, and this is common in all aspects of life, the things that work during one phase of progress are not the same things that are going to work and be successful in the next phase of progress. This is true in career. This is true in many pursuits in life. The thing that makes you successful at the beginning is not what's going to make you successful in the next phase. And so I think that's what a lot of the guys that I work with that are in that phase, they had some kind of go-to solutions that got them there. And now they're just sort of feeling stuck there and not sure how to get out because the strategies that they employed don't change.
Yeah.
Or they don't know how to change those strategies to get what they want.
And a lot of emotion comes from comparisons, where you're comparing to what used to work and made you feel a certain way, and now you feel this way, and you think you should feel that way. And that's super frustrating.
Right.
And I think there comes a lot of almost disappointment that it's not working again. And you kind of start to worry, like, how am I going to do this? Is it even possible? What does this look like now? And we have to really kind of break those chains of comparison to, what you were lifting in your 20s and what worked when you were in your 20s. Like, you have a family now, like things are a lot different in terms of how much energy you can devote to a certain thing. What is your metabolism doing now? So getting out of that comparison can be really helpful. Or just, acknowledging the fears that come from that or emotions that come from it.
I think another pattern that I see with that group is that, and kind of going back to what I was saying with the strategies that got them there, they were able to enjoy caloric surplus and often a significant caloric surplus. And when you're first kind of going up, you can be in a surplus without feeling that fluffiness, or maybe you might, rationalize it or kind of look past it. So you're used to training in a caloric surplus, and in some cases, often a significant caloric surplus. When they get to that 20 to 240 range and they no longer feel comfortable with the fluff and start making choices that, at least in their understanding, they think are going to help them cut back on the fluff, they will often be in a caloric deficit, and training in a caloric deficit feels very different than in a caloric surplus, especially if they're taking big, wild cuts for short sprints of time. Then they might be in a really significant caloric deficit. And so training starts to become this frustrating loop of being stuck, cutting, not feeling good, maybe having big swings, which is, I would say, a very consistent thing that I see with that demographic is wild swings. Maybe wild sounds a little bit melodramatic, but big swings in their caloric intake.
Yes.
So that'll be the guy that eats an entire pizza and a 6-pack of beer. And maybe that's somewhat of an exaggeration, but that type of thing where it's like they'll be super rigid on their diet for breakfast and lunch and maybe the weekday dinners. Maybe even this is a classic demographic for getting into intermittent fasting, because they're like, oh, this is just really easy for me to not eat. But then they get into the afternoon and they're hungry and they snack, which turns out to actually be like 1,500 calories.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they're just grazing on nuts and cheese and beer, and doesn't seem like they're eating anything. But anyways, they'll have some sort of pattern like that during the weekday. And then on the weekend, there's a lot of blowout activity, which again, might not feel like they're eating a lot of food.
But it's so calorically dense.
Yeah, probably a lot of it's coming in from alcohol for some people.
Right.
Or very caloric dense food that's not super satiating. So it could be the pizza, it could be the high fat meats on the grill.
Yeah.
Which again, I want to clarify, I'm speaking so confidently about this because that was me. I'm
like yesterday?
Not placing any judgment on this lifestyle. Yeah. This is definitely it's just kind of the normal, or at least very common thing for guys in that zone to do.
Totally.
And so a lot of the conversations I have with guys that are looking to make change in that is, again, as always, we want to build the foundation of consistent strength training and maybe start to shape ways similar to what we talked about before, where we want to broaden the spectrum of things that we can evaluate for progress, because depending on how much weight they want to cut, the strength might not go up. But often, because we're going to stabilize nutrition, they could actually make more progress. Like in my example, when I did a gradual cut and recomposition over a long period of time, I hit all my lifetime PRs while also losing about 25 pounds. My press PR was very early on in that process, and that kind of suffered after that. But my squat, my bench, and my deadlift were all well into that body recomposition. So the fun thing about the fluff zone is that strength progress is very much possible still in that area.
Yeah.
And if you manage it well, you can still maintain or maybe even build a little bit of muscle mass, depending on how you kind of navigate that.
Yeah. We kind of talked on this. Just, I want to make sure I highlight this. There are like 3 different ways you can lose weight and, gain muscle at the same time. It's like if you're super, super new,
yep,
and you haven't trained, you haven't developed any muscle, and you have excess body fat. Or if you have excess body fat and you're like training again, or if you're on gear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than that, it's really, really, really difficult if you want to lose weight and gain strength at the same time. So the fluff zone is great for that.
Yeah, it's like at best a maybe based on what limited research we have. But I, in practice, have really only seen it with the people that have a lot of excess body fat to work with, because that help the body can pull from that.
Yeah.
But even then, the body's going to preferentially pull from muscle mass because it's so expensive to maintain energetically. So you got to evaluate yourself to see what's going to happen. But practically speaking, with that cohort, that demographic, the things that I find to be most important are figuring out how to reduce the variation, which is another way of somewhat saying what I did with the previous guy, where we want to build consistent habits. It's kind of the same thing. It's just that with the fluff zone guy, there's usually these big swings on the weekends or the nights or the snacking. And another big one I see with this group is poor sleep quality.
Totally.
I think, not to say you can't also emphasize that with our other guy. It's just that that person, for whatever reason, tends to not have that as much of an issue. Although, not to say it isn't. It's just that with the fluff zone guys, I definitely noticed there's a pattern, and it may be associated with alcohol at night kind of a situation where like the sleep quality is just not very good. And that is not going to help you in your goals for recomposition. Can't emphasize sleep enough with anything that we talk about, but definitely if you're trying to lean out and you're in that zone, I would prioritize cutting out the big swings in calories and prioritize sleep. Those are the two things I would really go after first.
Big game changers. And those really influence how you feel. Like,
yes,
you can be eating pretty similarly, but if you don't sleep and have had 4 drinks over 2 nights, you feel so different than if you had not drank and had 2 good nights of sleep. Like, everything else in the week could have been exactly the same.
Yep.
But that'll affect your training. It'll affect how like bloated you feel. It'll affect your mood. So it's like it puts a dark cloud on all the other good stuff that might have been going on.
Yep.
So what do you think is like the dream state for this guy? If they had, like an ideal body and feel in their head, like, what do they want to look like and feel like?
I think the one that comes up a lot is how pants feel.
Ooh, yeah.
Like pants size and kind of what's happening around the midsection with their waistline. It seems to be the thing that is a sort of real world subjective metric that people will notice that their pants fit different, or they don't feel like they're kind of spilling over their pants. And
this is where high-waisted yoga pants came from.
yeah, just keep pulling them up higher.
Yep. But it is a great metric because you feel it when you're sitting down. That's when you're working and you can't do anything about it, but feel those rolls and you feel terrible.
And you're just sitting there feeling it all day. Or you're sitting in your car, like commuting, and the seat belt is like kind of digging in a weird way.
In the airplane. Yeah. Oh, God.
I think 9 times out of 10, if I can help a guy in the fluff zone get to a point where his pants start fitting different, or he's able to get down a pant size, especially if their waist is kind of floating up into that 40-inch kind of range. If we can get their pant size or their waist down to like 38, 37, 36, something like that, they start feeling real good. And I would say they're also happy if they can do that while still not having to eat perfect or super clean all the time. And that's another reason why I like to focus on consistency, is reducing the wild swings, because you can have a lot of those things that people associate with.
You can still have fun.
You can still have pizza. You can still have burgers. You can still grill steaks. You can still have some alcohol, but we got to learn how not to blow it out. A lot of those guys in that zone, I notice, are very binary. Like, they're super successful in multiple aspects of life, and they have this gear where they can just like, I am going to do this. And then somewhat of a coping mechanism is kind of blowing it out in some other aspect of life, a couple of times a week, and just like really going, just like it's the same mentality. And again, I know this and can speak confidently from it because I am this guy. Like I can go all out with my training and nutrition, and then I can go all out, having fun and eating probably 10,000 calories in a day without even really working too hard at it. So
yeah.
So yeah, learning how to balance those days out, level them out, snacking. Snacking is often, like I said, for that cohort, a big area of opportunity. And again, being gradual.
Oh, yeah, totally.
The thing that's going to make it sustainable is to learn how to make the changes gradually so that you can steer the ship very slightly in a direction and gradually, minimum effective dose, change your body over a long period of time and then adjust as you go based on whether that's working for you or not.
Very possible to reduce the fluff and still work hard and still have fun.
Absolutely.
You just kind of get more specific and precise with how you do it.
And the training, I wouldn't even really have to change that much for that group. That's the other thing about making the small changes is that you can then also let the MED changes in your training adjust with that. You might have to change your goals a little bit, but
yeah, someone like that, it's really nutrition, like 80% is about like, okay, let's change what you're doing outside of the gym more than anything. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of actually goes back to where we were at with the other guy. You know, a lot of people I'll hear want to ask for hypertrophy at this point, which in their mind means typically doing something with higher reps.
Getting the Fight Club bod.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly do that, but you don't have to. And it's not that it's a better solution other than from setting expectations perspective and that strength identity that we were talking about before. I think it's really hard for somebody to attack their training because if they're constantly having to compare back to the fact that, well, 2 months ago I was hitting this 5 RM and now I'm at 80 or 90% of that, I don't feel like I'm making progress. You know, so I think that's about managing the psychology and kind of expectations of your training. Or you can add in some exercise variation and set and rep variation if that makes it more fun for you, but you don't have to. I think you can be just as productive doing roughly the same structure, whether you're in a deficit or a surplus.
Yeah.
But it might just be harder mentally to keep showing up doing the same program that you were doing before on a surplus when it felt very different.
Yeah, that's something that I'm sensitive to because I don't like it when people feel like they're being punished for going into a deficit, you know?
Right.
When you decide to go in a deficit because you want to look and feel better, and now all of a sudden being in the gym hurts and you're just comparing yourself to how great these things used to feel. So I think you should never, be punished for wanting to make that change. And I think that can happen with the right kind of programming changes.
For sure. Are there changes that you've made that mitigate that feeling in a deficit?
I think different rep schemes are really helpful and sets across, looking at PRs for sets across that we might not have done before. Even something as simple as going for like sets of 4 instead of sets of 5, different exercise variations, stuff like that. And constantly reminding, this is a new PR at this body weight, which is really cool.
Right.
Looks really good. Or we've made your deadlift get off the floor without your back rounding. That's huge. So, or even such thing as, form PRs, which I feel like I was always working towards form PRs in my deadlift.
Body weight.
Oh yeah, like chin ups. Mm-hmm.
Body weight lifts. Like I definitely emphasize chins when somebody decides they want to start going into a body weight, and a lot of the other lifts are struggling. But man, you drop down from 260 to 240, chin ups get a lot easier.
More fun. Yeah.
So we ready for number 3?
We have a lot of wonderful clients who are women too. And I think most of our clients, I can safely say this, who are women are also moms. I coach some ladies too who don't have children. So I think that's important to distinguish because what I've recognized in our clients who are moms is that they usually have younger children, which tends to mean they are doing a million things a day. And they're usually they're last on the list in terms of when they're going to train, when they're going to choose how to eat. It's like they are their last priority. They're helping run the family. And they're also, I think, really kind of competing with this expectation of they need to be crushing it professionally. They need to be crushing it as a mom. They also need to lose all this weight and look really good and be able to continue to do everything all the time. And that is just such a heavy expectation.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important thing to consider with these clients is they'll take care of everybody first. And they'll try and do everything. And when they can't do everything, they will beat themselves up so bad. And
yes.
that's something
I have two clients that I feel like you're describing to a T. That it is just amazing how much they do. And then if any one piece slips or whatever, I don't even want, it's not even slipping. It's just like if any one piece doesn't go to what they expect, they're really hard on themselves, I think. It's like,
Yeah. And it's hard to see because you can see all the things that they're doing, all the things that they're managing and taking care of and still getting to train. And you
yeah,
can see their numbers improve and they're lifting these amazing weights.
right.
And then for them to not meet their own expectations, which are so high. So that's a really wonderful client type to work with because they're also so hardworking. Like a lot of our clients are. Like
Yes.
they will do what you tell them to do, and sometimes they'll do more.
Yeah, totally.
And then we have other women who we work with who I think have really gotten that bug. Like we talked to Monica on a recent podcast, who they want to have muscle. Like, we go to the gym now when we're traveling, and you say this all the time. You're like, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't women with butts at gyms. Like, no.
Now they're trying to get butts. Yeah.
Yeah. 2020 is like, this is like the decade of big butts, which is fantastic. So there's just like so much more of a push for women to have more muscle and to have a certain shape. The tough thing there is, I think, I even opened my Instagram this morning to look up something, and I just got like walled with this feed of just like ladies with huge butts, abs, and who knows what is freaking photoshopped. But it's this really interesting body type that you're driven to want to look like without it maybe even being realistic. And of course, it's a photo, it's a snapshot of someone who's maybe dehydrated. It's their genetics. They've had butt implants. You don't even know, but all of a sudden it's planted in your head like, I need to have muscle. And then you see these really gorgeous like female powerlifters who are really jacked and strong. But then you've also been, kind of brought up thinking like, I also need to be less. I need to continue to eat in a deficit. I need to have a tiny waist. For me, like I always believed that when I sat down, especially when I was in a bathing suit, I shouldn't have any rolls, which is like in my stomach, which is like so impossible unless you're very, very, very skinny. And it's hard to be strong when you're very, very, very skinny. So there are these always just like daily, monthly, across the year, different season, these two competing goals of I want to feel really powerful and build muscle, but I need to be smaller. And so it's like this really constant tug of war just all the time. And so I think that's what I think a lot of women really feel like when they want to get into strength training is how can I get muscular and be strong, but I also am so afraid of being any bigger. Like I don't want to step on the scale and see a higher number. And even me, I've had attachment to like a certain clothing size. And what's funny is like that clothing size started to make me look fat. And when I went up a clothing size, I didn't look fat anymore. But like, it's just the way it was still like, it was like wrong in my eyes to go up to that clothing size, even though it like frames my body in a better way. So I think with that journey, being really aware of that internal battle is really helpful because it's not something that we can just turn off. If we could just turn off that expectation, we probably would have already done it. And starting to be, I think, driven by how like a workout feels is really useful. Like for me, that means like being able to, pick up 225 and then being able to pick up 265 and then being able to pick up 315 and being like, holy cow, that is amazing to feel like that equals feeling strong. And, you might not have been able to do that anytime in your life unless maybe you were an athlete in school before, but you don't know what it's like to feel strong. And so you start to build that definition the more you train, and having someone help you understand that is just like a huge eye opener, I think, for a lot of women who in their head are like, well, I need to build muscle. Well, what does it feel like to build muscle? It feels like being able to do push-ups. It feels like being able to bench 95 pounds. It feels like being able to deadlift your body weight. So you really start to flesh out that definition.
I find myself doing a combination of validating their efforts and their accomplishments because I don't know, and I get the impression they don't have a lot of people in their lives that recognize what they're doing and how amazing it is. I mean,
yeah,
both of my clients, mid 40 or late 30s, early 40s moms that are also working professionals are deadlifting mid 200s for reps, about to deadlift 300. So, recognizing their progress, validating the work and showing up and supporting all of their priorities in their life and trying to keep training as something that it feels good to show up and it feels good to be strong.
Yeah.
And prioritizing showing up more than anything.
Totally.
I think has really been helpful. There's still, I think, a little bit of frustration. I can tell when they're not hitting the numbers that they feel like they should be, or if the scale's not moving the way that they want it to. But I try to be there. I think I lean a little bit more into being a little bit more of the cheerleader in that regard, or maybe framing it to, if I put it back into that framework kind of responsibility, that I'm trying to frame their training in a way that they can see the progress as well.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I think is common for all of our clients, but especially these two women that I work with, is that I think that it's just totally normal, or that they should be further along. Totally normal that they're pressing over 100 pounds, or something like this. And, they're like one of probably a very small number of people that are in that phase of their life and doing what they're doing.
Right.
And just trying to make sure that training isn't one more thing that they feel like they're
not being perfect at.
Yeah, exactly. So, I try to give them, and this is true for all of my clients, I'm not doing anything particularly unique. I just find that giving them a little bit more wiggle room on the day to be able to flex with the fact that sometimes their day just gets completely nuked by one of the kids getting sick or, whatever thing. And again, this happens with guys as well. It's just that I noticed that, like you said, there's a little bit more of a tendency for the training to get backburnered. And so, I try to just be really supportive of everything else that's going on and validate that they're getting stronger as, they keep accumulating more of those days.
Yeah.
And associating that feeling of strength and accomplishment with showing up and doing the work.
Yeah. Showing up and knowing that showing up and doing one thing is still very meaningful towards what they've stated they wanted to do. And Nikki Berman's really good about this. I think she might have even done a podcast on this, like how to never miss workouts, because it's the workout being missed and turning, red in our calendar that we feel, and it hurts. But maybe you look at your workout for the day, you have 3 lifts and your day got nuked. So you go in, you got 15 minutes, you see what you can do in 15 minutes, and you probably got the first workout done. And that is awesome because it's still moving forward. And it doesn't have to come at the cost of what everything else that's expected of you that day. You get 15 minutes of great training in, it's still forward momentum. And I think having permission for that is giving yourself permission to do that 15 minutes and know that it's still really, really useful is really important.
And what are the conversations you have when that client journey is that they want to recomposition? Bring it back to that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, will really come down to nutrition. Sometimes I'll hear it as, can I do more ab work? Or I'd like to do more conditioning because I want to lean out. And we have to really talk about what that would mean in terms of their life outside of the gym. And that's, another, managing your own nutrition when you're managing the nutrition for the rest of the house is really, really tricky. But I think that one of the most important things you can do in the beginning is just take an inventory of what you're eating. I always like to have people just start to get aware of what they're eating with our visual food diaries and just kind of start connecting with when you are eating and when you're not eating. Because I think there's that battle comes up again where it's like, oh, I can't eat too much. I don't want to gain weight. And then, we're all highly emotional, male and female. So we'll have times where it's just like, you know what? I'm out for brunch. I want to enjoy myself. I worked really hard all week. And so we're in that same situation that you were talking about before where nutrition is not stable.
Right.
So let's see what we can identify from your current habits that will lead to some more stability. And then we can kind of, make some changes. And I also think that making changes around the type of food can reduce bloating so much that you don't feel like you need to lose weight anymore, because there can be things that we're eating or drinking that make you feel kind of acutely inflamed and bloated. And if you eliminate that, like with our 10-day nutrition challenge, you feel so good again that you don't even think you need to lose weight.
Yeah.
You might still have to do that, but I think everybody would benefit from, cutting out added sugars, cutting out processed foods, keeping protein in every single meal, not drinking booze, but drinking a lot of water. And you do that for 9 days, and you might have a completely different outlook on what you want to change in your body after that, because the way your pants feel different. And I'd say if you can do that, then check in on how your body's feeling. Then let's talk again about actually reducing your body weight. Because I think women, it takes such a long time to build muscle that if we want to do an actual cut, you'll very likely, and you might not have enough, excess body fat as it is to be able to conserve a lot of the muscle mass that you've invested so much time in building, that it's useful to make sure it's what you really want to do before we go into a cut.
Yeah. And I noticed that the diets or what people associate with cuts, especially I get the impression from talking to women that the diet on a cut is extreme. Like it's very restrictive. It's very low calorie.
Some magazines said 1,200 calories, and that's what ladies do.
Yeah. And which is really hard to train.
Full steam investment in caloric reduction, which totally leads to the swings of, massive cravings. And then that's where that yo-yoing comes in. You're totally right.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And so I think learning the gradual approach, like you've mentioned before, is a game changer. And planting the seed of what it's going to be like in 3 months. Like 3 months seems to be a short enough time frame that I can wrap my head around what I need to do for the next 3 months and how that's going to feel, and know that I can do something different after that. And it's not a year-long commitment to being in a bulking and cutting cycle, which already sounds daunting.
Right. In contrast to the 1,200 recommendation, what do you typically see? And obviously every individual is going to be different, but what kind of calorie range do you tend to see is still supporting strength training and recomposition, or, it's not going to be something where somebody's going to be gaining a ton of weight? Again, every individual is going to be different.
It's a bit different. I think my ladies tend to actually be closer to 1,900 calories.
Yeah.
So it's a good amount of food. They're training. They need to be able to come in and train and move all this tonnage around, but it's not 1,200 calories. You'd have to be very light for that to be in there.
What do you typically aim for?
For myself, my current caloric goal is 2,100, which is awesome.
A lot different than 1,200.
A lot different than 1,200. You can have a lot more fun with 2,100.
I think my breakfast is 1,200 calories. Granted, I know there are a lot of women that want to be 245 pounds.
Yeah,
but,
different goal. But yeah, anyway, I think some of the most important things to take away from this discussion about, wanting to change your body composition is thinking about it in phases. Give yourself time to achieve this. Talk to your coach about what it's going to look like and feel like over, the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And hopefully you heard how important it is to stabilize your nutrition, how important it is to keep training, and how it takes time. And that's okay. You can have what you want, depending on how extreme you want to go. There are going to be some trade-offs, but it's doable.
Yeah.
But you need to take some time to talk about it with your coach and actually flesh out where it's coming from and what it'll take to get there.
And I think it's interesting to note that we didn't talk about how we need to add in a whole bunch of extra conditioning or a whole bunch of extra cardio or radically modify the strength training component of it. A lot of it was coming down to conversations about nutrition. That's not to say that you can't add cardio or conditioning. I mean, those are certainly things that I think are part of any good strength and conditioning program, but
yeah,
it's not that you need to go spend a bunch of time trying to sweat it off or,
right,
burn a whole bunch of extra calories, because no matter what you're doing in your training, you're always going to be able to more easily add calories than you are going to be able to burn them. Add calories from your nutrition.
So true. I love that you said that. I've noticed I go to a spin class. You come with me too sometimes. And I have another girlfriend who will go with sometimes. And I know she always wants to be losing weight. And I have another friend who they go to spin so they can lose weight. And like, I want to go to spin well fed, well hydrated, so I can just like crush that class. And I can't imagine going to spin like hungry and in a deficit. That just does not sound fun at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when you're doing conditioning, that's another state where you don't want to feel like you're punishing yourself, add in conditioning and have fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing conditioning for the cardiovascular benefits,
Right.
Being able to train those energy systems, not burn extra calories.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it's definitely something, like I said, that should be in your overall program, but not for the sake of trying to recomposition.
Yeah, it's so true. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, again. And thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we'd love a review. We'd love some stars. And if you think this would be helpful to anyone, please share it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.